Hello everyone. Today in this video we are going to discuss about bank account management, like how the house banks are created and how the bank accounts are linked to the house bank and many more steps related to bank account management. If we see the screenshot, these are the Fiori apps which we use for bank account management. If we see here, we use manage bank accounts, overview maintenance, manage banks basic, my bank account, work list, my sent requests, foreign bank account report. So this is the bank account management in SAP S4 HANA concerns centralized bank account management. Bank account management processes control the life cycle processes of banks and bank accounts, such as opening, changing, reviewing, and closing bank accounts. So, in this section, we will learn how to manage the bank directory, bank accounts, and house banks. So, in this figure, as I said, we can see some of the apps which we use for bank account management in SAP Fiori. So first of all, coming to bank directory. If we see here, we can see the number of house banks and number of bank accounts linked to that house banks and the countries where these house banks and bank accounts are created and the bank name. Bank directory helps in providing all the detailed information related to all house banks related to that company. So the bank directory is a list with the details of all the banks you and your business partners do business with. The directory is maintained via the Manage Banks app, which provides an overview of all banks in the system. If we want to know the details of all the banks which our company or partner companies use, we can check all those banks in this bank directory. And now comes creating a bank. So if we see the screenshot, we can see the general data. The first of all, if we see the mandatory fields in the control data, we have given bank country, bank key and bank name. With these three things, we will provide a unique key for the bank. So what is the bank name and bank key and bank country, and the rest are the additional details like bank group, bank number, bank grouping, business partner number, and address of the bank, and also risk information. So how we are going to rate that bank? So we can add new banks and display and change existing banks. If we want, we can create a new bank or we can change the existing ones. Banks, at least for the country where the company code is located, are commonly created by uploading a file to SAP S4 HANA with SAP GUI transaction BAUP, which is country specific transfer of bank data, or transaction BIC2, take over BIC data. So if we talk about banking customization, there are many methods we use to upload files which we receive from the banks. In the same way, for creation of bank, we can use two methods, which is an transaction code BAUP, where we can load the file, or we will receive a different format of BIC data from the bank, which we can load to our system. So at least for country where the company code is located are commonly created by uploading a file to SAP S for HANA. Okay, there are many different ways. To create a bank manually, we need the following details. We need to know bank country, bank key, bank name, SWIFT code, bank group, BP grouping and BP number, address, risk information. The SWIFT or BIC code is an ISO code identification for banks worldwide. The code is used for money transfers between banks. So these are the fields which we require to create bank manually in our system. So now house banks. We have already created the general data, means this is a new bank creation. Now we are going to create the house bank. House banks are the banks your company code does business with, meaning the company has its own bank accounts at the bank to make and receive payments. So for a house bank, you maintain the following fields. So the company code and the house bank. You can also maintain details for communication, data medium exchange, bank charges, and electronic data interchange, EDI. So house bank definition, if we see here, we will give company code and the house bank, and the address comes from the bank key, and we can give the data medium exchange, how we are going to communicate data with the bank and the company. Now we check bank account creation. Once we create the general data for the bank account, then we create the house bank. In the house bank, we create the accounts. So if we know, like in a single bank we can have multiple accounts. So now we are going to create the bank accounts. You use the manage bank accounts app to create new bank accounts and maintain existing bank accounts. So if we see here in the screenshot, we have given the basic data. We can see it as an inactive, opening date, and the company code and the country and the account holder, and account details will be like in which country and bank key and bank number, and we can give even SWIFT code and IBAN number, currency, IBAN valid from, account number, description, and account type. These are the few more details which we give while creating the bank account. So the steps will be like, we will first create the high level, like in which country the bank is existed, like bank key and the country, and then we create the house bank, like we have in states, right? In every state we will have a house bank. So again in that we will create the account IDs. So we have to explain in detail to the SAP system, like where all these banks are located. So to create a new bank account, we need like opening date, when that company code, account holder, bank country, bank key, currency, account number, IBAN, description, account type. So it is in detail what kind of account it is, and more details about the account holder and which company code and when the account is opened and everything. There are more fields to maintain, such as contact details and data for bank statements. You can also directly enter a profit center and segment in the additional data tab. You can also directly enter a profit center and segment. After saving the bank account as active, you can enter additional details as well, such as the payment signatories that are responsible for approving payments, overdrafts, limits as agreed upon within the bank, and the connectivity path. So on the connectivity path tab, as shown, you link the bank account to the corresponding house bank account. On this tab, you must enter a identification code for the house bank, up to 5 digits in the house bank account ID field. Now comes the part of house bank and house bank account ID in general ledger master record. So where do you assign this? So in create bank or interest tab, we can see the house bank and house bank account ID. In each house bank account, each house bank account must have a main bank general ledger account assigned, and the same general ledger account can be used for multiple house bank accounts. You create the bank account before updating the connectivity path. When the assignment of the bank account and the general ledger account is unique, you can also enter the house bank and house bank account ID in the general ledger account master record. So if it is not unique, we cannot assign this here. So these are the few things about how we create a house bank and how the house bank is linked to the general ledger master record. So as we are preparing for the associate certification exam, so the topic covered will be the basics of the bank account management, like what is the important fields to create a bank account, or at what level we can create the bank key, some kind of questions related to that bank directory. So we will see in our section of certification questions. Now next topic, document parking. So even for document parking we have apps provided in Fiori. So if we see here in the screenshot, the apps are like Park general journal entries for ledger groups, delete recurring entry, post parked journal entries, park general journal entries, change parked journal entries, display parked journal entries, change parked general entries only header, parked journal entry changes, rejected parked journal entries, input tags from parked documents. So these apps are developed with the um, by understanding the problems which end user is currently facing with their business processes. So they will gather the information from the companies how they need the apps to be developed. So by taking into consideration the existing problems of the end users, they will mainly develop all these kind of apps which should be helpful to the end users. So with document parking you can post temporary incomplete documents in SAP S for HANA. You can add and change information, perform additional checks and post the complete document after verification. In this section we will get an overview of parked documents and we will learn about document parking workflow and understand how to park and post parked documents. So as shown and as explained, these are the applications which we use for document parking. So if we see overview of document parking, it's in first thing which we see is for held document, holding a document. The held documents feature is usually reserved for shorter interruptions when posting multi-line documents. The held documents feature is usually reserved for shorter interruptions when posting multi-line documents. For example, if you get distracted by something urgent in your mailbox while entering a document or you need to ask someone something about the posting, you can save the document as a held document. This ensures that you won't lose the data entered up to this point from your browser, timeout or unexpected power or network loss. In general, only the user that created the held document will find and retrieve the document to continue working on it or delete it. No document number is generated when you hold a document, and no values can be evaluated in reports. So this is the important point to note. So no document number is created for the held document or no values can be evaluated in any of the reports. No standard workflow takes advantage of the held documents functionality. So held documents is just only for a kind of draft purpose. Now parking a document. Let us see the difference. You can use document parking to park an incomplete document in the system, because this might be for other reasons. It might maybe need some extensive entry checks such as for tolerance limits. However, it does check that entries made in the document such as tax code, general ledger account, cost center and so on are created in the system. The system assigns a document number to the parked documents and document number doesn't change when you finalize the journal entry, but for parked documents you will get a document number. So parked document can be created for many reasons, like then there should be an extensive check on the field values which are entered in the document, or it might be it might require multi-level approvals because of the tolerance limit exceeded, tolerance limit of the amount exceeded. And also we should keep in mind some considerations for document parking. Substitution isn't performed for document parked documents. It will take place when converting the parked document to a complete journal entry. So we have to remember, when we are entering the parked document, the substitution will not take place. When we are converting the parked document to the post document, at the time the substitution will be performed. You can park a cross company code document. In this case, only the posting in the originating company code receives a document number. So for cross company code document, the the originating company receives the document number. When a parked document is posted as a final journal entry, all relevant documents are generated for all company codes. So one thing is substitution, other thing is cross company code documents, and parked documents can also be used for business evaluations in the system. For example, you can evaluate them in advance return for tax on sales and purchases reporting. So whole document cannot be used in reports, but parked documents are used in the evaluation of the reports. You can also use payment requests that reference parked invoices, so you take advantage of the payment discounts. You can also use payment requests that referenced parked invoices. Take advantage of payment discounts. If you delete the parked document, the number assignment is lost and can't be reused. This shows up deleted parked document in audit journal reports so that the document number gaps can be explained. Now, document parking workflow customizing. If we see the screenshot, it looks very complicated. If we see the graphic model of the workflow, like its workflow started and initialize the level and increment level and release the level 1, and if it is approved, it will release the release flag and workflow will be completed. Otherwise it will do the same loop again and again. So let us see some basic steps in the workflow process. SAP business workflow in the SAP S4 HANA system can be configured to help automate the coordination and communication between components in the SAP S4 HANA system. So help to automate and coordinate and help automate the coordination and communication between the components in the SAP S4 HANA system. Many standard workflows are delivered with the SAP system. So an example we use is the single level release for document parking, that is WS 15052, which is a sub workflow within the workflow framework for document parking, which is 51. You can see the design for this workflow in the figure. So in certification, there will be few questions related to workflow, so that I need to cover this part in this video. Let us see. So for that purpose, first they need to define workflow variant. So workflow variant, currency and the name, and they will set up the limit, release from, and sub workflow, posting, release. So very roughly a workflow begins with a triggering event such as creating a master record, posting a purchase document, or parking a journal entry. The workflow manager assigns a work item to the organizational objects. Mainly this workflow process will be done with the help of ABAP team. So we no need to worry too much of it, so that these background things and all will be covered with the technical consultant. The organizational object essentially defines the users allowed to perform the workflow action. When a user picks up the tasks from his workflow inbox, it is removed from the inbox of the other users. After accepting or rejecting the item, the workflow manager defines the next step of the workflow. The first step in defining the customizing for the document parking workflow is to define the workflow variant as shown. Here you define if posting release is used, the amount from which a release is triggered, release from, and the sub workflow scenario used. So now we will assign the workflow variant to the company code. The workflow variant is assigned to one or more company codes as shown in the figure. This assignment also defines the currency of minimum amount previously set in the variant. So here define workflow release groups. You can define release groups if you want to assign varying release procedures for your business partners. As shown in this figure, there are no underlying settings. You just assign a key and description to define the groups initially. Now we assign the release group to the vendor. So in this figure it shows you can assign the release group in the master record of the business partner. After selecting the customer or vendor role for financial accounting, you maintain the release group in the company code settings and under the account management area. The release approval path is the object for which you define who processes the release approval. So define release approval path. So you create the release approval path object by defining a key and description. So why you use this release approval path? To help defining who processes the release approval. So now we assign the release approval path. The release approval path is determined by the workflow variant together with the document type and release group. So we can see the combination in the below screen. We are assigning the release approval path based on workflow variant, document type and release group. If that is the first combination, then we will be assigning the release approval path. And also, as shown in this screenshot, we can assign different sub workflows in accordance with the release, approval, path and the amount. So workflow variant, release approval path. So till that amount 2, release 1, and sub workflow. This allows you to define, for example, more release levels or different approvers for larger posting amounts. So in the final customizing step, you define who is responsible to perform the release approval per workflow variant, release approval path, release level and amount. For each combination, you assign the relevant organizational object. So we can see in this figure, shows that the manager job is assigned. We can see here the manager job is assigned. The system identifies the users responsible for releasing the parquet document based on the assignments of the organization object. Organization object. So that is the basic part of workflow configuration. Now if we move on to this, we see how the parquet document is getting saved. So this figure shows a document posting of a parquet document with the park journal general journal entries app. The user default action at the bottom right of the screen is to save the parquet document. In other apps such as post incoming invoices app, the option to park document is in the top bar and the default option is to post the document. And we can see here, after you save the parquet document, you can retrieve it for editing. So editable and non-editable fields in the parquet document. This is one of the important questions in the certification exam. Which fields you can edit and which fields you cannot edit in the parquet documents. Editable and non-editable fields in parquet document. However, not all fields can be changed after parking. Remember, a document number is assigned, so it makes sense that some fields are protected. You can't change the following fields. As we all know, we can't change the company code, we can't change the document number, we can't change the document type, we cannot change the ledger group and the currency. Basically, the most of the fields in the document header: document number, document type, currency, company code and the ledger group. There are not any limitations for changing the line items of the document, so you can remove lines completely and add new ones as needed. The system keeps a log of changes made to the parquet documents because it is useful for auditing purpose. After verifying the document, you can post it. The system will create a journal entry with the same number. The document is subject to the normal posting checks and substitution will take place. The change history is retained and is logged in the journal entry. The user posting the document is assigned as the user who entered the document irrespective of the user who parked the document originally. So if there are different users who performed the parked and posted actions, finally the posted action user only will be get updated in the system. If a workflow variant is assigned and the parked document is relevant for workflow, you can see the relevant approval path and release level in the workflow tab of the parked document. In the workflow control section of the screen, you can determine whether the document release is required. Release request marked as complete, document complete or completed successfully, released. So we can see if the first checkbox is checked, the document is requested for release, so someone has to approve it, then only this document will get released. This all happens with the basic configuration which we showed in the previous slides. In the top bar of the screen, you can see the options a processor has, namely to release or reject the document. If a document is released, the document can be posted. If it's rejected, it can be changed and sent back. The processor can write a note to explain a rejection decision. The workflow items that require processing are delivered to the inbox of the relevant users as determined by the system. A user can select to forward the work item to be processed by another user. There are many different actions which can be done through this workflow. After releasing an item, it gets put in the processed workflows folder in the inbox and you can retrieve it. You can check the log for the workflow item at any time during processing. The system keeps a very detailed log of all steps and processes, as you can see on the workflow log screen. Here you can see the steps performed and details for each one. There are also different views for the information, such as workflow agents view, which concentrates all action per workflow agent processor, and the workflow objects view. So you can see workflow agents view and workflow objects view. Different views such as workflow agents view, which concentrates all action per workflow agent, and workflow objects view. So each and every step performed in this workflow will be triggered in this log. So now we check on journal entry verification. So verification processing apps. So verify general journal entries. Verify general journal entries, one for requester, one for processor, and one is for outbox for the processor, and one is for the inbox for the processor. So an additional simpler verification process for setting up and executing a workflow for reviewing and approving journal entries is also available in SAP S/4HANA. The general journal entry verification process is offered as of SAP S/4HANA 1709 and is available only through SAP Fiori. So the journal entry verification process is in SAP is offered in 1709 version and is available only through SAP Fiori. You use three apps, one for requester to submit entries for verification and two for the reviewer to manage pending and submitted entries. Based on this new functionality, SAP delivers a predefined single-step approval workflow for verifying general ledger journal entries, but you can adjust it to your specific requirements. Okay. A simplified process diagram of journal entry verification process is shown in this figure. So if we submit a journal entry and workflow preconditions met, if yes, it will assign a processor and processor will verify the entry, and if he founds each all the data in the document is perfect, then he will post the entry. Otherwise he will reject it and send it for editing. And one more condition is like, if the journal entry workflow conditions are not met, the workflow will not get triggered. So on a high level, you submit a journal entry for review. The system reads the document details such as company code, amount, account assignments, and if the workflow prerequisites are met, it assigns a processor. The processor then reviews the submitted journal entry and either accepts it, in which case the journal entry is posted, or reject it, in which case you must correct the document and resubmit it. The detailed process is analyzed below. And the verification process: verify general journal entries. So we can see the screen. We can search here the submitted or company code. Is there any journal entries which need to be submitted? And we can see the status as submitted, processor, journal entry, and posting date, company code, submitted by journal entry type, amount in company code, and the period. So a requester will create and submit a journal entry with the verify general journal entries for requester app. This app is like the post general journal entries app. You can create manual journal entries or upload them from an Excel sheet. The system will check the journal entry against a set of pre-configured criteria. So mainly it's the amount, and determine the proper workflow processors to assign to the journal entry. The requester has access to view the status of the submitted journal entry as it is being processed. The request processor uses the verify journal entries for processor app to review the request and select an action for each. The journal entry will be posted if the entry is complete and correct. The requester must edit and submit. For reject, the requester will edit and resubmit the entry. Suspend the document. If the workflow status is shown as suspend, the document is put on hold for later processing at a time indicated by the processor. So there are three types of actions. One is approval, rejection, and suspension. So in this verify journal entry for processor, the processor has two separate verification apps. One is for inbox and an outbox. You use these to process journal entries depending on their status. So if we see here, the screen, verify journal entry screen, journal entries line item, action description, and debit amount and credit amount, and we can see here submitted by, and it is submitted, and these are the entries which were already submitted for review. So now we check on workflow configuration. If we see here, verification workflow configuration apps. So configuration apps are manage workflows for general journal entry verification, define responsibilities. There are two configuration apps for setting up the workflow for general journal entry verification. Manage workflows for general journal entry verification is a configuration app to set up the workflows that are active and the prerequisites that trigger the workflows. Manage workflows for general journal entry verification is a configure to set up workflows that are active and the prerequisites that trigger the workflow. Define responsibilities is used to assign users or group of users to the defined workflows. So if we see this, we can see here the workflow step header configuration and the valid from and valid to date, and only start the workflow if the following preconditions are met. The preconditions are source code should be 1010, and step 1 verify of workflow object determined automatically. When the step 2 determined automatically, threshold amount in the company code currency 1000. If it is 1000, so it can be posted automatically. So with the manage workflows for general journal entry verification app, you define header information, the description, validity period, and the preconditions for the application of the workflow. So this screen tells about workflow verification step configuration. The workflow is only activated when the preconditions are met. The preconditions you can define are based on a combination of values for the following elements. It can be like account group, threshold amount, cost center, source company code. Then you define the step sequence settings for the verify and post steps of the process. Here you assign the rules for the approvals and preconditions and control the exceptional handling. There is no reason to go into detail here. So as I said before, in this associate certification, it doesn't talk much detail about workflow. It covers only the basic steps, and it's sufficient to know that you can define multi-level workflows and different processor per various preconditions. Now responsibility, who is responsible for this journal entry. So the responsibility and derived from rule and abbreviation and priority, amount of company code currency, source company code. We will be giving more details who are responsible for the particular company code or to this journal entry. With the define responsibilities app, you define the responsibility specifications by setting a priority 1 to 99 and assigning the amount, ranges, and company codes the responsibility is valid for. So assign users for verification rules. Then in the same app, you assign the users or groups of users that are recipients and processors for the workflow verification. So in the same app, we will assign the users or group of users that are recipients and processors for the verification workflow. So these are the few configurations which is related to workflow. So once this Fiori apps are developed, it is they are very helpful for the end users to figure out the easy way to which are the pending workflows and which are approved, and many more tasks like that. So let me add few certification questions in this video so that we can complete this video in detail. Related questions related to bank accounting, workflow, and parking and hold documents. So, which of the following steps are parts of the process of configuring the payment program? So, this is actually a question related to automatic payment program as it does involve house banks. I have included this question in this video. So, for the APP, the configuration is configuring the paying company codes, configuring the payment methods for each company code, and configure the house banks. We don't, there is nothing related to GL account field status for document entry. So this ABD is the answers. At what level is the bank master data stored in SAP S4 HANA? Please choose the correct answer. At what level is the bank master data storage? Is at client level. You have been asked to set up house banks as part of the implementation. What information do you need? We need bank master data, company code, and general ledger account. What types of data are maintained for a house bank? So what are the types of data we maintain for a house bank? General ledger account, overdraft limit, payment signatories, data medium, exchange details. The general medium exchange are the answers. So identify the fields that cannot be changed while changing parked documents. So as we discussed, it should be currency, company code, and document type or document number. A, C, and D. For which of the following can you park documents? So sales invoice, it is created under SD, so we don't have any control. Customer and general ledger accounts. Which functions allow you to temporarily save the entered data? Park and hold function. Which fields can you edit before posting a parked document? We can edit amount and the posting date and account because it is in the line item. During which actions does the system assign the document number? So park and post. What type of architecture does SAP Business Workflow use? Single tier. Which of the following statements are correct? Choose the correct answers. So there are two correct answers. A task can be assigned only one, no. A company code can be assigned several, no. A same workflow can be assigned to several company codes, yes. It is possible to design multi-level workflow sequences, yes. C and D. The SAP business workflow has dash process dimensions. Choose the correct answer. It is 4 process dimensions. So by this we have completed the certification, even certification questions for these topics. Thank you so much for watching this video. We will meet in our next video. Thank you so much.